Well, this is a big Sunday at the Bridge, 40 years of being a church, and we get to celebrate together. We had invited Steve Larson to come, and I'm disappointed that Steve wasn't able to come, but I'm so excited, Steve, that your health has progressed to where you are this morning in Liberia or on your way to Liberia. Why don't you give us an update on what you're doing these days?
Well, I think most of you know I've been spending my time with Global Training Network. My mission is to go to third and fourth world countries to train national pastors who have never had any training. Last March, a virus attacked my heart and reduced my heart function to congestive heart failure. In fact, I actually coded in the emergency room where they had to shoot me with some atropine. God brought me back. And so a few months later now, the heart function has improved. It's still low, but it's improved to the point where the doctors feel comfortable with me traveling. So I'm on my way to Liberia now. And when we get there, we're going to be spending a few weeks there with the pastors and wives, training them on how to parent your children so that they can train the people in their church. And we're so excited. I am just blessed beyond words that God has set us free to resume the mission that He's called us to.
This is our 40th anniversary. That's a long time.
Yes.
And I would like for you to just take us back. We want to look back in the rearview mirror for a little bit. 40 years ago,
Yep.
you got together. Talk about that first Sunday.
Well, let me give you a little background first. We moved up here. We started a home Bible study. So our legacy as a church is our gathering on Sunday morning and the community groups that people have in the homes. And those are our two foundational principles. And I think they're still foundational to what you guys are doing. So we started as a home group, and there were 6 of us meeting. So we met in October to about May. And one of the great things about starting a church when you're young is you're so dumb, you don't know what you don't know. And we decided to start meeting in June. We had 27 people. We actually counted Connie as 2 because she was pregnant with Matt Larson. Even though there were just a few people that day, we met in the fireside room of the Borchard Community Center. It was an awesome day of just people believing that this was going to be the seed of a significant church in this valley. Right from the beginning, we had that sense. So that's where we started. It was June 17th, 1979.
Well, I have 3 months worth of memories at the Bridge. You have 34 years of memories at the Bridge. When you think back over that time, what are some of those, maybe just 1 or 2 of those significant times that you think back and just remember from this time?
I think our first 8 years were pretty amazing. We didn't have a facility for any of those 8 years, a permanent facility. And we moved, I think, 9 times in those 8 years. So the joke of EV Free, which was at our original name, is we're a great church if you can find us. Because every year the Yellow Pages, back then people actually used Yellow Pages. The Yellow Pages were out of date in terms of the information every year. But people would call us and say, "Are you guys still a church?" "Oh yeah." "Well, I went to the place where you're meeting and nobody was there." "Oh yeah, we've moved to Banyan School." So we moved from Borchard Community Center to Sequoia, to Banyan, then to the Seventh-day Adventist Church in Newbury Park. And in 1987, we found our first full-time facility. So I think the great thing is, and the thing I loved about those days, is because we didn't have a facility, it forced us to be simple. We couldn't over-program as a church. And I think the great thing about that is we encouraged our people to get into the community, coach soccer, be involved in your PTA, make friends with people who are far away from Jesus. And so on any given Sunday, we would have between 10 and 20% of the people there who were non-believers, who were being brought by the relationships with the friends. And so all of those were just great memories of those first 8 years. Real simplicity, not a lot of structure. As any of you know me, you know I'm the antithesis of a structured person, and so those first 8 years fit me pretty well.
Now you've mentioned 1991 as a significant time in the life of the church?
1991 was a time where, and I look back, and the neat thing is everybody had great hearts, even though we disagreed. And the beautiful thing is there's been some wonderful reconciliation from those difficult times. But we lost in that year, 1991, about 80% of our people.
Wow.
We went from being a church of 650 to a church of 180. I had presented my resignation twice during those times, was planning to move to Colorado, and somehow God just wouldn't allow us to move. So all of the details we'll put aside, but the bottom line is about October 91, I'm still there as pastor. We're meeting, we got 180 people in the church. We can't afford the facility we're in. And it's time for us to renew that lease. And by faith, the people believed that God wasn't through with us as a church yet. So with the over 90% vote, people voted to re-engage or to renew that lease. Well, unbeknownst to us, Amgen had been hoping we wouldn't renew that lease because they wouldn't wanted the building we were in. And so after we renewed it, they came to us and they said, if we were willing to fund your move, would you be willing to move to a new location? And we said, yeah, we would be happy to, because we were in very deep financial straits at that time. Over the next year and a half, we negotiated. Nothing was on paper. Everything was done with a handshake. The vice president of Amgen was a great man of integrity. And those of you who know my dad, remember him. He was an amazing businessman who kind of led our negotiations with Amgen. Everything was done with a handshake. And about a year and $2 million of Amgen's dollars later, we moved into the facility that we're in now. And what was so amazing with that is the deal that we signed gave us 6 months free rent, which allowed us to catch up on our finances and begin to build towards the future. So our first meeting here was May of 1993. This facility began an amazing era of growth for us. And over the next 10 years, we again grew from a fairly small church to a very substantial church that made a great difference in this community. So it's just a neat lesson that everybody is going to go through good times and bad times. And we went through some bad times, and yet what followed was, I think, some of the greatest years of our church in our time there.
You had shared with me that you reached a point where the church name EV Free of the Conejo Valley just wasn't connecting, maybe a bit cumbersome even. There are a lot of church names out there. Why the Bridge?
We spent about a year on renaming because we really begin to understand that with people who don't know Jesus, the term evangelical is no longer a positive term. In fact, it's actually kind of a negative term. It implies a politically active, politically conservative Christian. And not that we're not any of those, but we didn't want to be known as those things. And it actually, when I would tell people the name of our church, they would kind of, oh, you're an evangelical, huh? And they were not saying that positively. They were saying that like, oh, you're some of those weird people, aren't you? And so we decided that our name, which when we started had been a real plus for us, had become a negative. And so we decided to rename. That launched us into a whole series of looking at different names. We realized that there was nothing new under the sun. We weren't going to find a name that 100 other churches hadn't used. And so after praying and looking at who we are and what God had called us to do, we decided on the Bridge. And the reason we decided on the Bridge is we realized that Jesus is the bridge between us and God. With his death, burial, and resurrection, he is the one who has been able to bridge the gulf of our sin which separated us from God. And what we began to realize, Jesus said, I am the light of the world. And then he looked at us and he says, you are the light of the world. And we are now in the world doing exactly the same thing that Jesus did. And that's being a bridge between people who are far away from God and Jesus himself. And so that's why we chose that name.
And I think that brings us to this last question pretty well. It's our 40th anniversary. We're going to spend a lot of time looking back, but we're also moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And from your perspective, founding pastor, still being in the community, having a pulse on the community, knowing what's going on to some degree in the bridge, do you have any encouragement as we move forward as a church?
Mark, just getting to know you has excited me about the future of this church. And I honestly believe the greatest days for the bridge are still ahead. There's one thing I've learned over the 34 years is that if you hang around, you're going to go through some ebbs and flows. You're going to have great years and great eras, and you're going to have some very difficult eras. And those sometimes can be very painful. And some of you who've been around have been through some pain over the past few years. But you know what? If you endure, if you stay faithful, if you regain the vision that God has given you, and most of all, if you make unity the priority of the church, because that was Jesus' priority for the church, I believe that there are days ahead for the bridge that are going to go beyond anything that we've experienced in the past.
Well, that's a great word. Hey, we're praying for you as you're in Liberia, and thanks for taking this time to meet with us this morning. God bless.
And I just want to say, both Connie and I wish we could have been with you. We had planned this trip for a long time. We had planned it in faith, but we just felt like God wanted us to be continuing on what he had us to do. So God bless you guys, and have a great day of celebration.